Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another edition of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. This time it's a post-draft podcast. We had talked about the draft so much, and now here we are on the other side of it. And I'm excited again to come and talk to you about our actual picks instead of projecting picks. Tonight, as always, I got my co-host Greg Thompson with us. He's wearing the little Bills lapel, so I'm wondering if he's got a job with the Bills front office now and he's leaving us. Is that the announcement you're making tonight?
I can neither confirm nor deny those reports.
I wasn't privy to this information.
I wasn't privy.
Yeah. And I'm really excited that I know you're super busy and you took some time out here to be with us. Our fellow Cover One contributor, builder of the best draft guide out there this year, Jordan Reid. Jordan, how you doing, my man?
Good, man. Excited to be here to talk Bills.
It starts all back over for you. You just finish the draft process and you start right back up again, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Already working on some 2020 guys.
Oh, man.
Always on that grind. That's great. It's impressive. I respect it, but whew.
You guys are sick in the head is what I think. No, it's great. And I'm excited to talk to you because I know that you watch the Bills draft closely. Obviously, you're working with Cover One. You have to pay attention to us because you follow all of us. So there's no way around it, even if you wanted to avoid the Bills. So let's get right into it tonight. We'll talk about some other things after. I know you're a busy guy and you're hopping on radio and doing all kinds of things all over the place. So while we got you, I want to pick your brain. Bills go right into it. They're on the clock. I'm on Twitter hearing a bunch of rumors. They're trying to trade up. They're talking about Quinnen Williams. They're talking about maybe trading up for Ed Oliver. They wait it out, stay put. They're up at 9. Ed Oliver falls right into the lap. Perfect scenario, a couple QBs. Things go. Oakland shocks the world. And Greg, who was live at the time, shocks him. Ed Oliver falls right into our lap. Slam dunk, easy decision. What do you think about the Bills taking Ed Oliver at 9 and how that played out?
Well, I kind of think it was destined to happen because of all the clips that were surfacing on Twitter. You saw Ed Oliver running his 40, but when he was doing his positional drills, he actually ran into one coach by accident, and it just so happened to be Sean McDermott. I'm not sure if you guys seen that clip.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
It kind of seems like this fit was destined to happen, and I love the fit. This was by far one of my favorite picks of the first round. And I say that because Ed Oliver really fits the mantra that they're trying to build in Buffalo. And I know blue collar is the term that's thrown out there loosely with Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane a lot, but that's exactly what Ed Oliver brings to the table. A guy that he really satisfies a need that they had along the interior. And I know they had Harrison Phillips, Jordan Phillips, and Star Latuile in the middle, but they don't have anybody with the upside of an Ed Oliver. And he's not just a 3 technique. And that's something that a lot of people have been saying, but he can bring you pressure from all different types of positions. And then you combat that with Jerry Hughes. And edge pressure really is something that the Bills have struggled with in the past, but you can just stick Ed Oliver out there in sub packages and even on third down just to create chaos in that middle, just in case you want to get any of those 3 guys that I mentioned earlier along the interior on the field, along with Ed Oliver and Jerry Hughes. So I really love the fit there with him in Buffalo.
I love the idea, like you said, the versatility that he offers. You know, when you get into 3rd and 8, you kick him over to the star role, and then you kick down Shaq Lawson, you bring in Lorenzo Alexander into one of those interior pass rushing moves, and kind of like almost like the old school Giants NASCAR formation where you have 4 just pass rushers there, and he can play any of those roles. I love the versatility of what he brings. It's really exciting to see.
And now, obviously, you draft a guy here. You're expecting – I know it's out of the range of blue chip prospects, but I think a lot of people that I talk to and a lot of people I read had him as their 3rd, 4th best player on their boards. Did the Bills get as close to a blue chip as you can get at 9 in Oliver? And then to follow that up, what type of impact should we expect from him year 1 and early on his career?
Oh, yeah, he was a blue chip prospect to me. He was my number 3 ranked guy on my board, and seeing him fall this far, especially seeing players like Clelin Ferrell and Daniel Jones go ahead of him, it was a bit puzzling to me considering the needs that both of those teams had that selected those 2 players. And I think they made a mistake passing on Ed Oliver, especially with the Raiders at 4. I thought that definitely could be a situation that he could walk into and contribute right away. But the Bills being able to stay where they are and still being able to get Ed Oliver right away. And then the great thing about Oliver is that he walks into a situation where he really doesn't have anybody in front of him. And I know they pay Star Latuile a lot of money, but I don't think that should keep them away from starting Ed Oliver right away because, I mean, let's just be honest, guys. He does not have nearly the upside that Ed Oliver does have right away. And it wouldn't surprise me if he is a starter at that 3 technique spot from the first game of the year.
Yeah, I do think he comes in immediately and is the guy there. And it was something that we knew was a need and a fit. And I think no better way to start off the draft than not only get a need, but also that need be the actual best player available and the best player on a lot of people's boards after the first two guys, the top two guys.
Well, the combination it offers also is you can start him, you can give him good immediate playing time, but also having Jordan Phillips and Harrison Phillips means that you can deploy him intelligently. You can have him play a good amount of snaps, but he doesn't have to play a crazy amount of snaps. Even, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves and assume he's going to turn into the Geno Atkins, the Fletcher Cox, the Aaron Donald. Those guys eventually in their third, fourth, fifth year get up to the 80% of snaps. He doesn't need to do that this year. You can use Jordan Phillips. You can use Harrison Phillips. Be smart in how you deploy him and let him stay really fresh and explosive.
Yeah. And with the Buffalo connection, I know they kind of talked about on draft night that Kyle Williams already reached out to him. We know that Sean McDermott wants Kyle Williams a part of this organization in some capacity, maybe not in an official capacity, but I think that is going to be a great resource to lean on him, not only to introduce him to Buffalo, the area, but to teach him some of the things about the game. I guarantee you Kyle Williams is going to be at training camp this year and in his ear and helping him develop. And I think that's a perfect situation for a guy like that. Let's get down a little bit more because this is a guy I think a lot of fans assume you go round 2, that this guy's going to be an instant contributor. I don't know. After talking with Eric a little bit, I don't know if that's going to be the case here, but we did trade up a couple spots. There was talk that Brandon Beane even said they were considering trading back up into 1 to get him because he was a first round grade on their board, but the price was too steep at the time. Cody Ford falls to him. 38, they go up a couple spots and make sure that they grab this big-bodied, mauler, mean dude, kind of fits their archetype of what they're looking for. What have you seen out of Cody Ford, and what should Bills fans expect with that pick?
I'm a big fan. He actually got a first-round grade on my board. I believe he was ranked my 20th overall prospect. I believe that's where I had him slotted. I think the most interesting part about this entire fit is that just like Ed Oliver, he's another guy that fits the identity that the Bills are trying to create, a vertical type of offense, vertical type of running game that really just likes to run straight ahead, right at defenses and really just lay on them. And that's exactly what Cody Ford was able to do at Oklahoma. And there was just so many questions out there about just what position he would play. But him having guard experience in 2017 and then switching to tackle in 2018, I think that's going to help him a lot. I think what position they ultimately end up playing him at, I think that's what's going to be key to his success. And we'll see if he does end up providing competition at tackle with Ty Nsekhe or Deion Dawkins, or if they slide him inside to provide competition in there. I think he's going to provide value at either one. And the great thing about that is that, I mean, if you think about it 2 years ago, the Bills were very thin up front. But now, I mean, they're 8 or 9 guys deep, which is something we haven't said about the Bills in a very long time.
No, heck, we might be cutting guys who started for us last year, maybe multiple. Aaron and I have been in the middle of a lot of these debates, and I'm really torn on what's best for Cody Ford long term, what's best for the Bills in 2019. Do those things line up? Is there, we're debating, is it best for him to learn at right tackle, really lock in there, work on the technique, get his body into NFL nutrition and training, and that might involve Ty Nsekhe starting all year at right tackle and Cody Ford just being a really valuable backup? Or if he's better than the other options at right guard, whether that's a John Feliciano or a Spencer Long, do you have him play at right guard? Because then you're getting your best 5 on the field, and that's the best for 2019, knowing that he might need to kick out to tackle in the future, and then you might be taking, the kind of 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how they play that out this summer and what's best for the team this year, what's best for Cody Ford long term, and how do they balance that is going to be a very interesting debate to watch.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't know the answer to that. What would you do? You're the coach of the Bills, and you have this opportunity with this big body guy, but you got a couple tackles already, and you got a nice backup swing tackle. Where do you start off his career? And do you live by, if you start him at guard, can you kick him out later? Or if you start him at guard, is he kind of stuck in that position moving forward?
I think he has the versatility to play both, but me personally, I would try him at tackle first just because tackles are much more valuable than guards. I think you can kind of hide guys along the interior, while tackle, you can't necessarily do that unless you want to attach a tight end. And he had success last year as a tackle. And I mean, we know that Ty Nsekhe isn't their long-term answer there. He's about to be 34 years old, I believe. So he's probably not going to be with the team for the foreseeable future, 3 to 4 years down the road. But you have a younger guy like Cody Ford that you can sign to a second contract 4 years from now if he is your long-term solution at right tackle. So I really like the three-man competition there that they have going at tackle between Deion Dawkins, Nsekhe, and Cody Ford. So I'm really interested to see the training camp battle between those two at that right tackle spot.
Yeah, no, I am too. And there's going to be battles all across that line that are super exciting, but that's definitely going to be one that fans are looking for. Obviously, Nsekhe was a huge signing for them as far as fans are concerned and really addressed the need. And then you bring this guy in. It's something we haven't seen in a long time, a battle at an important position besides quarterback.
Okay. Eric put together a graphic earlier that I think the fans are going to see pretty soon here. And it was just kind of a nice visual of the projected starting lineup. And, we threw some names out there, but it had a backup set of 5. And the backup 5 was Leadrian Waddle, Wyatt Teller, Russell Bodine, John Feliciano, and Cody Ford. And I was like, good Lord, those backup 5 are better than the line we had all of last year. It's just an unbelievable problem we haven't had in a long time.
Yeah. And at some point here, we'll keep moving on. At some point, a guy that's going to be running behind these massive human beings that they've got. And I think they will be a better run blocking team moving forward. But in the third round, they go with Devin Singletary. I have to say this at the time, right immediately, surprised me a little bit. I obviously looked at all these running backs, but once we got TJ Yeldon signed, I really didn't think running back was going to be in the cards. I thought maybe if they held on some of the late picks and a guy fell, that sure, or you take a waiver on a Bryce Love and you stash him for a year. Did not see Singletary being a target and then being the first guy in the third round that they picked. They grab him. Pretty exciting prospect, very interesting because his athletic profiles that you see online aren't good, but then you turn on the tape and he looks every bit athletic as any other running back in this class. What did you see from him, and where do you have him with your running backs?
This was actually one of my draft crushes of the year. I'm a huge Devin Singletary fan, and if you think about it, he's a carbon copy of Frank Gore coming out of Miami. So I'm sure that's probably something that really intrigued them to an extent. And I think somebody is probably going to be SOL in this group. And we've seen how disposable the running back position is. But this just goes back to what McDermott and Brandon Beane were preaching all year with that. They want competition at every single position. And they've done it with offensive line. They've done it with receiver. And now they just wanted to do it at running back, even though it is a disposable position. So you bring in Singletary. He can be that young option also with Yeldon. And then you have 2 older guys. And we know LaShawn McCoy's price tag is up there. And his future, I think, is still in question with this team. I'm not so sure if they end up shipping him off elsewhere, if they just end up cutting him outright. So we'll see what happens with that position. But I'm a huge fan of Singletary. The biggest thing that I love about him is he's not a guy that's going to look good in what I call the underwear Olympics at the combine. But when you turn on the film, he's creating something out of nothing. And he is just so good at creating behind the line of scrimmage. And he's never had good blocking in his career at Florida Atlantic. And now getting with the offensive line that is going to be better, when he sees those holes, I think he's going to be a really good talent. It's just a matter of the biggest adjustment for him is going to be special teams. He has to find a way to play special teams because he's never done it at Florida Atlantic. And I think in order to make this team, he is going to have to carve out a role on special teams, especially if they do end up keeping all 4 of these guys. There's just no way he's going to get a carry in that backfield because all the other 3 ahead of him are already proven commodities. So maybe he starts a year out on special teams, and then in 2020, he maybe is that young guy that they have in place behind whoever's already there.
I could even see, like you said, that whether it's a carbon copy, some people have compared him to Shady. So the combination of what you see in Gore and McCoy, that neither of them tested terribly well. I think that was kind of what you were touching on, that neither of them were workout warriors. Neither of them translated in the combine like they did on film, but some of the statistics that he put up, especially obviously some of the raw numbers are gross with how many touches he had and the yardage and 67 touchdowns and stuff like that. But his percentage of yardage after contact for a guy that people try to claim is too small and wasn't athletic, you can't gain that many yards after contact unless you got something special going on. And in the presser, being touched on things that don't really translate in a combine workout, exceptional balance, elite vision, really special instincts. And I know I love the one quote that he gave about, he may not be a home run hitter, but good luck with him in a phone booth. And that, just in that short area, which is, Aaron's made the point a lot of times, that's what the NFL is that phone booth, short, tight area in the box. He had some highlights where he just made guys look silly, where there's 3 or 4 guys around him and is able to take a back cut that was just gross and be able to jump around them. So I'm excited to see where they do that. But I actually think he could even be a half red shirt year where he's on the 53, but maybe not on the game day 46 all that often without an injury, and that he could be because you're going to have to activate. You can't release or try to practice squad a third round pick. But I could actually see that if Gore, Yeldon, and Shady all stay healthy and make the team, maybe he's on there but not active on game day early on.
Yeah, I can see that too. One thing I want to talk to you about a little bit here is I know when we had you on pre-draft, we were talking about some of the running backs, and I know you mentioned Singletary and a number of other guys. And one of the things I want to get your opinion on, having watched a lot of him, is 2 things really. His ability for pass blocking, because that's always a big concern with me with rookie running backs of getting any play, is when you throw them in there and they don't understand pass protection. That drives me totally crazy. It's a big reason Marcus Murphy hasn't been able to really get a lot of playing time. He's just really never picked up pass coverage. And with a guy like Josh Allen, you need somebody that understands that, the NFL. And then pass catching, not a lot happened at Florida Atlantic. Is that more of a issue of the scheme, or did they not feel confident in him and his ability to do that? He's going to have to do that at the next level. Is that something he can translate into the NFL with?
Well, he has to work on his technique as a pass blocker, I will say that. And he's a bit of a smaller guy, and he attempts to stand in there and fight, but sometimes he just doesn't have the strength in order to hold up. So that's something he's going to have to develop over time, which I think he will be able to do. Now, as far as a pass catcher, I think he's fine in that area. If you go back and watch him at the combine, he was very comfortable with doing that. But it's just Lane Kiffin didn't utilize him in that area because he was so effective running the ball. So they felt as if they didn't really need to involve him in the receiving game. But they did flex him out and allow him to run some routes from time to time, but they didn't really target him a whole bunch. But, I mean, a guy that scored 66 touchdowns in his career, I mean, how much more pass production can he have just because he was such a great running threat? And, I mean, he has really soft hands for the most part. He doesn't fight the ball or double catch or anything like that. So he's a comfortable pass catcher. It's just a matter of digging up the clips and actually find him doing that. And that's something that's really hard to find just because they just didn't utilize him in that way in Lane Kiffin's offense.
Cool. But when I see some of that tight space stuff that Greg was talking about, I think of the screen game and his elusive being able to shake some stuff. And that just gets me excited. And hearing you say that he has the ability to do that gets me even more excited.
Jordan, did you see anything? It was, like you said, I think the Lane Kiffin part is the part that a lot of people miss. I know just box score, looking at it, 26 catches as a freshman, 19 as a sophomore, 6 as a junior. You think that was simply system generated, nothing negative reflecting on him?
Yeah, it was all system generated, and they ran the football. When they got the ball inside the 20, it was the Devin Singletary show as far as between tackles or out on the perimeter, and he was so effective. And you guys talked about his contact balance, which was just out of this world, and he was just so good as a running threat. They didn't think that they need to utilize him as a receiving threat.
Good. Now, one last question on him, and we'll move a little bit forward. Another thing that I get a little bit nervous at with the box score scouting type idea is you look at the number of carries, and then you look at the yards after contact. It wasn't like he wasn't getting hit. He's breaking through tackles. He's got a lot of wear on his frame coming into the league. Is that a concern, or are you not even worried about that and kind of just move along and see what he's got?
This is always an interesting question to me, and I think it's a case-by-case basis, honestly, just because some guys have the armor in order to hold up, and I think he does have the armor for that just because if you look at him, he's a really thick guy, even though he's only 5'7". So I think he has the body structure in order to hold up in the league. And yes, he got a lot of mileage at Florida Atlantic, but he never missed a game in his entire career. And I think that means a lot for his future going forward. And maybe he does wear down as time goes on. But as far as what he's shown to this point, he hasn't shown any signs of wear and tear at all, which I think is really good for him.
That's awesome.
I know it's interesting as we kind of move on to the next part of the draft. This transition here was one of the most interesting to me because I think a lot of fans and especially a lot of, maybe some of the more, Monday morning quarterback scouts and people who like to try to be draft experts try to find, okay, does Bean have a type? Does this team lean more towards the relative athletic scores, or is it all on the combine, or is it all on the film, or is it all into the, production in college? And going from Devin Singletary, who was one of the most poor scoring from an athletic profile, but had off the charts production in college, and going to Dawson Knox, that's almost zero production and all projection and just hoping that the film translates to where it is. I found it really interesting that those were back-to-back picks and such polar opposite ideas of the kind of prospect. What were your thoughts when the Bills turned in the card for Dawson Knox, the tight end from Ole Miss?
And that's a really good point. And I think something you guys should really look at is I think the Bills do have a type. And I hate the term greedy just because it's a cliche term, but it's exactly what that is. And just talking over the first three picks, Ed Oliver, a guy that really played out of position at the nose tackle spot. He's standing in there taking blows, and he's standing his ground. Cody Ford, I mean, we know how nasty and the tone setter mentality he brings to the table. Now, flipping the switch a bit with Dawson Knox, I think the gritty aspect of his game comes more as a blocker. And that's where you see it. And they used him a lot on the backside of concepts, and he was on the front side of some running game concepts, but he's standing in there and he's fighting. And I think he was a much better blocker than what he's given credit for. And as a receiver, you just have to understand who was ahead of him. And he was at the bottom of the totem pole. And they had DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, and DeMarcus Lodge there. So you have to understand that he has three really top dogs ahead of him. So he's not going to get those looks and that production that teams were looking for. I mean, he's never scored a college touchdown in his entire career, which was okay for me just because when he does touch the ball, you see the potential that is there with him. And then you have to go back and look at his production and just why it was lacking. They had some quarterback issues there with Jordan Tiamu. I don't think he was one of the better signal callers in the league. And he really struggled getting the ball outside of the hashes, especially if it wasn't to A.J. Brown. And Dawson Knox really was a decoy for a lot of those routes. But when they did push the ball to him, he showed that he can settle down in zone coverage, and he also can beat man-to-man coverage. So now that he's going to take on a bigger role in the Bills' offense, whether that's as the number one guy competing with Tyler Kroft or in that number two role behind him, I think he's going to be just fine. Now, once he's able to get in that expanded role, now we can see him blossom into what a lot of people thought he could turn into.
Now, that's a great point they bring up about, pushing Kroft or even in that tight end too. Do you think this is a guy that comes in and has an immediate impact, or is this a guy that we're drafting on the potential and that it's going to take a little time to develop? We know rookie tight ends don't tend to come in and make a huge impact right away. It's very rare when you see that. Is this a guy that Bills fans maybe need to pump the brakes on for 2019 and that he's more of a long-term build up a really strong weapon? Or is this a guy that could come in and really make an impact on this offense starting this year?
I wouldn't say right away, just because the thing with tight ends is that I think a lot of fans fail to realize that of all the positions, especially as rookies, they are the one that are trying to learn two positions on the fly because they're trying to learn as a receiver and they're trying to learn as a run blocker. So that's essentially two positions in one. And that's why I think tight ends struggle so much to translate into the league. And that's probably what's going to happen with Dawson Knox. But maybe by week 9 or week 10, it wouldn't surprise me if we're looking up and he has like 10 to 12 catches in a 3-week span. That would not surprise me at all. And I think once he gets into a bigger role, like he's going to be presented in the Buffalo Bills offense, I think he'll be just fine down the road.
That's really awesome. I'm very excited about that pick. Again, that was in that third round. I was panicking a little bit online when I saw him take Singletary and Knox because I couldn't wrap my head around us going those ways. But then we obviously traded up both 4th round picks, so we're a long wait going into the 4th round there, just sitting there. And I think a lot of us were hoping that they'd package some of these other picks because none of us wanted so many picks and move back up. But obviously, Brandon Beane stands pat, does not get all crazy like all fans wanted to. As some of these bigger name wide receivers are kind of falling. Everybody wants them to go up and get Hakeem Butler. They don't do it. They stand pat. And I think they got the guy that I'm probably going to fall in love with the most here in camp. I love guys like this. Vosean Joseph falls to the Bills. I think he's a guy that fits a need. We were looking in all of our mock drafts for different linebackers that would be a good fit. And this guy I passed right over. And I missed him in the pre-draft process, but now that I watch him post-draft, I think he's everything the Bills wanted to bring into this more modern NFL linebacker core that they have of these super fast physical freaks. What have you seen from Vosean Joseph, and should I pump the brakes a little bit on my excitement?
Not at all. And I think he's going to end up being a good player. And the one thing about Vosean Joseph is that he can run. That's what I love about him. And the Bills definitely do have a type at that position. We saw it with Tremaine Edmonds last year and how well he tested at the combine. And the one thing that we knew about Edmonds is that he had the versatility and he also had the speed that they were looking for, but he just kind of lacked instincts. But I think as the year went along, I think he got so much better with the more reps that he saw. And I think that's going to be the same case with Vosean Joseph, depending on where they do play him at. I think he's probably going to be best at that will linebacker spot. That's probably where he will end up at, just because I don't think he's big enough to hold up on the strong side at that Sam linebacker spot. So put him at will. And he has coverage. He has coverage ability, which I love. You have to be able to have at that will spot, especially if he's going to be that third linebacker, even the second linebacker on the field, depending on what type of defensive front that they want to run. So I love Vosean Joseph. I was a huge fan of him. I think I had an early 4th-round grade on him. So he went right in the range that he was supposed to go in. And I think they definitely got a steal at this point. It's just a matter of you just have to be patient with him. And I will say that just because his instincts isn't there all the way, but just like Edmonds, as he continues to get more reps and as the season progresses along and he starts to see the picture a bit more, I think it's going to slow down for him once we get to maybe like the last 4 weeks of the year. I think that's probably when the light will begin to click for him.
That's what happened for Milano, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and the key for him is very similar to Devin Singletary. You have Singletary gets to mentor behind Frank Gore and LaShawn McCoy. You know, what better can you ask for Vosean Joseph than, you know, go hang out and follow Lorenzo Alexander all around the Bills facility. Whatever he does, do that. And then year one, you know, he's kind of a human missile just trying to run around and hit stuff. Let him do that on special teams. Let Heath Farwell run with him. Let Vosean Joseph be a good contributing player. If we get into some really late in the year, some big coverage packages where you want him out there, he kind of fits the mold of that big nickel, what they did with Raphael Bush last year. Maybe he can be on the field in some of those situations, but we don't need him to play any, line of scrimmage linebacker this year unless short of an injury. So that's great. I think it's really nice to be able to ease him in with a mentor like Lorenzo Alexander just to watch and learn. And then like Aaron touched on, the idea long-term of a modern NFL linebacking core of Matt Milano, Tremaine Edmonds, and Vosean Joseph, man, that's a lot of speed, and that's exciting to see.
And they're nasty, too. They're not just fast guys when you turn on. Yeah, and to add to your point, Greg, of Lorenzo Alexander, one thing that I always talk about when I hear any additions to the linebacking core is Bob Babich. I think he is one of the best in the business at coaching linebackers. He's coached Hall of Famers. He's coached up great units. And that was Tremaine Edmonds moving to middle linebacker. I didn't have a ton of concern because I knew Bob Babich was in his ear the whole year to help him make that progression. And you get Bob Babich sign off on this pick. I think that he knows what he can turn this linebacker into. And that should be exciting for all Bills fans. We have a very good linebacker coach, and those guys don't always get enough credit. You talk about the coordinators and things like that. Babich could probably go off and be a coordinator somewhere, but he's just stayed as a linebacker coach his whole career. He just knows his lane and he stays in it, and we're lucky to have him. So then let's move on. They get into round 6, pick 181. And again, this was a guy I didn't really know a lot about. I figured we would walk away from this draft with a cornerback. I feel like you have to at least take a cornerback in every draft just because of the position. It's a passing league. Guys go down. You really need to find guys that can just stick and play. A lot of these guys can do a really good job on special teams. They've done it in the past. Bills take Jaquan Johnson, Miami. Not a quarterback, a safety, sorry. But I do think that he can play up on the line a little bit like that too. What do you think out of him? I didn't really have much on him going into the draft. I've watched a little bit after him. There's some exciting stuff there. Where are you at with him?
I think he'll probably be a special teams guy for the most part, but he's that back of the end depth that you're looking for. And I thought he performed pretty poor at the combine for the most part. I thought he showed to be a bit faster on film than what he ran at the combine. I think he ran high 4.6s at the combine, which was kind of surprising to me. I thought he was a little bit faster than that on tape, but he's your typical strong safety type of mode. I don't think he can play on the roof of the defense or anything like that. But if he's your third or even fourth safety, I think you'll be just fine. Now, he's not a coward or anything like that coming up and run support. I think that's really where he really excels. But if you're asking him to hold up in man coverage or anything like that, that's really where he struggles, just because he doesn't have the twitch and athleticism to hold up in that area. But if you just ask him to play a specific zone, I think he'll be able to do that just fine. But overall, I think special teams is really where he's going to have to carve out his role the most, especially early on in his career, especially if he wants to make this team as well.
Hey, Jordan, I got a question on him. I'm similar to Aaron. I was a big fan of Vosean Joseph and liked him coming in, but I had nowhere on my radar did I have, Jaquan Johnson to look at it. From a lot of things I read, it sounded like some folks had him last year as a much higher graded prospect, and some people thinking last year he was in some early 2019 mocks as a late first round pick and a potential top day 1, day 2 kind of guy. And then all of a sudden this year doesn't go as well. He doesn't test as well. I'm kind of trying to tell myself maybe they got a diamond in the rough or someone who could reclaim some of that early success. Was there anything you noticed or was on your radar as far as why was he exposed? Was it what he was asked to do in the defense? Just a rough year, but why it fell off from the kind of potential some people saw?
It was a combination of a lot of things, and he was battling a hamstring injury last year, and I think that was one of the biggest reasons why he just didn't look as fast as a year ago. And I think he actually was battling that at the combine too, so that might have been a reason why he didn't run as fast, but he just didn't look like that same guy on tape as he did in 2017. So that really is a big reason why. Now, he's a tackling machine. I think he's had like 80, 90 plus tackles every year at Miami. So he's a guy that's going to be able to come in and insert into the box if you're asking him to do that. But as far as being able to hold up in coverage, he's not going to be able to do that. That's really not his forte or where he excels. So, I mean, I was a fan of him coming into the year, but he just didn't look like that same guy. And you could tell that the hamstring injury was really affecting him.
Yeah, but a vicious tackler like that, I think he nailed it with carve out a role on special teams. That was an issue for the Bills here the last couple of years is consistent teams, put him at a gunner role and let him carve out a role. And if he can stick on the roster just doing that, great. And if he, like you said, is a depth safety moving forward, even better. A 6th round pick, just for fans, I know a lot of draft guys have different ideas of what fans should expect out of, say, the picks 1 through 10, so on and so forth, round 2. When you start to get to this point in the draft, what are your expectations as a draft guy of where these guys' careers should be projected? We're just talking about 5th, 6th, 7th round guys.
Well, I think those type of guys, you really want to take a chance on the high upside athlete. I won't say high upside, the athletic guys that really tested off the charts at the combine, but maybe they didn't have the stats to back it up, or if they're just coming from a small school and they maybe were overlooked or just under recruited for the most part. So even a guy like we're going to talk about here in a second, Darryl Johnson, who I'm a huge fan of, tested off the charts at his pro day. And a lot of people didn't really notice that just because he comes from a smaller school and he's a guy that really was under recruited coming out as well. So in these late rounds, I just call them lottery tickets. You really don't know what's going to come out of them. So you're taking these really uberly athletic type of guys. That's what you see a lot of times. And there's been plenty of teams around the league that took these upper echelon guys that tested in the 90 plus percentile in a lot of categories. And you're just trying to hit on guys this late.
So let's talk about that. 7th round, we got 2 picks. Guy I've never actually heard his name, and I didn't even know the school existed, to be totally honest with you. No, I did. Darryl Johnson. I look him up real quick, real bendy guy, kind of like you said. You know this guy really well. Tell us how you know him and what Bills fans should expect out of this pick, because there's not a lot of video out there for Bills fans to go check it out. So we're relying on you for this information.
So when I was coaching in my time at a small school called North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T is actually our rival. So I know a lot of background about Darryl Johnson. I saw him grow up from when he was a puppy, when he was a freshman, back when he was a 6'5", 200-pound defensive end to now being a 6'5", 250-pound defensive end. So I'm very familiar with him. I've had the game plan against him before, so I know exactly what he brings to the table. He was the reigning conference defensive player of the year, and he's a hell of a player. The thing that you have to understand about him is that he's very light right now. I don't even think, even though I think he weighed in at 253 pounds, I don't think he weighs anywhere near that. I don't think he played at that. I probably would say he played around 245 pounds. So he's probably a guy that's going to spend some time on the practice squad if they do end up getting him through there. But what you notice about him is that his twitch up the field. He is fantastic as far as an edge rusher up the field. Now he's very raw with his hands as far as having moves or anything of that sort. He's very foreign to that, and he's just able to out-athlete a lot of the offensive tackles that he did go up against in Division I AA. But when you go back and you watch him against some upper echelon type of talent, East Carolina, he was off the charts. Jacksonville State is another game where he was outstanding as well. So even when they make those step up in competition, I think he brought a lot to the party, and that's what makes Darryl Johnson so intriguing. And it wouldn't surprise me if we're looking up 2 to 3 years from now, he's a 265 to 270 pound guy, and maybe he can be that second or third defensive end at the in the middle tier of the depth chart. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And I'm not just vouching for the guy because I have some familiarity with him, but I think he's a really good player.
It's interesting. You don't often see guys at the FCS level leave early like that and be able to come out. And then especially that's not normally in the MO of the Bills. That's not something we've seen a lot historically. We did see a few more this year that were underclassmen, but that combo of someone who wasn't at wasn't in a lot of the Senior Bowl, East-West Shrine Game kind of games, wasn't someone that was on a ton of radars, came out early, so that you can really tell they must have bought in on the film that they saw, whatever. I'm not sure if they had some sneaky visits down there when they're running through the Southeast area to be able to get some stuff on their radar. But I agree completely in that I don't know that I expect him to make the 53. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch of a guy coming out that early, but I'd love to be able to sneak him onto the practice squad and then let him develop, get a year in an NFL weight room, get a year in an NFL nutrition system, sit there and just study Jerry Hughes all day, who is also 6'3", 255. Just sit there and watch him and pick him apart. And then, maybe then he's ready to contribute next year, similar to kind of the path Eddie Yarborough took with the Bills, and coming from a smaller school, first on the practice squad, earning a spot onto the team, developing his way up. I could see Johnson taking a very similar path.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to give a quick shout out because it's my former job, but I'm not vouching for it again or anything. But he came from the same school as Tariq Cohen. So a lot of teams are really stopping through there. And the conference, I think there's a lot of hidden talent. And Darius Leonard, that's another name that came out of the conference that Darryl Johnson played in last year at South Carolina State. So the MEAC conference really has a lot of talent. I think it's just hidden. And Darius Leonard and guys like Tariq Cohen are another name that really paved the way for that conference. And Darryl Johnson is hopefully can be the next name out of there. And I think he doesn't have as much upside as those guys, but I think he has a lot of talent that can eventually land him on a 53-man roster, whether that's 2 to 3 years down the road or whenever. I think he definitely does have a chance.
It is crazy how that all it takes is one or two guys to really make people start paying attention to some of those hidden talent schools. But I was going to bring up Tariq Cohen. That must have been fun to watch him live before anybody knew his name, because talk about uber athletic freak.
We beat him 3 times.
That's right.
We shut him down. He only had 80 yards. That was his career high against us. We were the only school that was ever able to shut him down. He was an amazing player, though.
Well, I won't tell my brother, who's a Bears fan. That'll upset him. But so let's move over to the last 7th round pick again. So we talked a lot about tight ends all this draft. We knew we were going to walk away with somebody. I think we kind of had these tiers of obviously the top 3 who you, as a Minnesota Vikings fan, got my draft crush on Irv Smith. We're not going to talk about that, but we talked about those top 3 guys. And then kind of there was this just kind of mix of guys who were just all kind of the same. But a name that wasn't in that mix of guys was Tommy Sweeney, a guy I've never heard of. You see, here it comes from Boston College. There's no more like South Boston name than Tommy Sweeney. I could see him chugging beers at a Boston bar. Who is this guy? Is this a guy we're just going to kind of laugh about at this podcast and never hear about again? Or is this a guy that could hang out on a practice squad and make his name in the NFL in some regard?
Don't be shocked if he's the surprise of you guys' training camp. And I say that because, like Dawson Knox, he was another name that was hidden within the scheme. And the first thing that you think about with Boston College is just a tough, hard-nosed running game. And his talent wasn't able to be explored in that offense. But when he did touch the ball, I thought he was phenomenal. And just go back and watch him against Clemson. I think that was one game where he had a couple catches to where it really was able to show off his ability. But when he did touch the ball, I think he's a much more talented receiver than given credit for. But he just wasn't able to show off in that offense because it was the A.J. Dillon show. And that's the running back there that has 1 million yards in that offense. So he was mainly used as a blocker for the most part. But now if he's able to be exploited as a flexed out tight end or an inline guy, I think he's a guy that could flourish as far as, some underneath routes or even being the decoy on some bootlegs and him being able to sneak out of the back door on some of those underneath routes. I think he's your ideal number 3 tight end. And I think that's a role he definitely could serve for the Bills.
Yeah, I think that I've heard some comments that he's going to be a very willing participant on special teams, that some people commented he might have had the best hands at the Senior Bowl. So I know Mel Kiper is obviously a big fan of Josh Allen, and he was talking about that when you have a quarterback who's throwing 95-mile-an-hour heaters over the middle, you want a big, strong target with good, strong hands to be able to bring those in. And that I've heard a couple of people make that same comment that you did, that, don't be so quick to assume Sweeney might be a practice squad target, that, when you have a guy who's a willing blocker, who's a willing special teams participant, who has good trusted hands, those are guys who catch coach's attention and might snag that 52nd, 53rd spot. And that if anybody's upset about this draft pick, it's Jake Fisher, who is the project coming over from Cincinnati, trying to transition from offensive tackle to blocking tight end, and taking a second tight end late in the 7th with a guy like Tommy Sweeney. That was certainly a tough, shot to the bow of his chances at the roster in my mind. I think that Sweeney slots in there. Last year we had similar thoughts where people didn't think we were going to keep, Ray McLeod or at that point Robert Foster was an undrafted guy, that they're careful about not exposing guys to the practice squad pickup for other teams. That, if Tommy Sweeney makes a name for himself here, I could see him maybe having a better shot at the active roster than some fans might think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Here, I know you got to get running here. You got a show to get to. One thing I want to kind of talk to you about, and I wasn't really thinking about asking you this, but as we went through this list and talked about these different prospects, common theme kind of kept coming up. And as a guy that scouts a lot of college and does this, all the time, what are your thoughts on a lot of these guys not fitting schemes in college and not getting the most out of guys that are clearly NFL potential players? Do you think that it's a disservice to the players and the coaches are too stuck in their ways and not getting the most out of these guys? And really, I mean, to me, college programs are all about preparing these guys for the NFL. And if you have an NFL caliber player, you got to find ways to get him the ball or get him involved and really bring his stock up, because that's going to help recruiting and so on and so forth. Where's this disservice coming from? Who's kind of at fault? What are you seeing in this, thing that we're talking about?
I think the biggest difference that we're seeing now between NFL coaching and college football coaching is that college football is all about winning games. They don't really care about getting these kids to the next level, just because they're all about themselves. And I'm speaking from personal experience because I have seen it before, and it's an ego-driven type of industry. And every coach sees a job as a stepping stone, unless you're at an Alabama or a Clemson or a Georgia. It's all about getting the next job. And that's what we're seeing with these head coaches. And the example that I always use is Jarrett Stidham at Auburn. Everyone knows that he wasn't a fit at all in that offense, but Gus Malzahn still stuck to his ways, like Cam Newton was still operating that offense. And he's running them basically into the ground, even though he's not a running style type of quarterback. And he just never adjusted his scheme to Jarrett Stidham and try to make it fit around him. Instead, it was a my way or it was my way or the highway type of approach. And that's what you get a lot with these college coaches. So now it's really making it hard to evaluate a lot of these players coming into the draft. And we've seen a lot of examples. Even you guys pick with Ed Oliver is another prime example. There's no way that he should have been playing head up nose tackle at all, just because he's just not going to survive in there. But he still was able to do it somehow. And that kudos to him. That really shows his character, even though a lot of people had character questions about him because of that whole sideline jacket fiasco, which really seems like it was 5 years ago now since he's a top 10 pick. But college coaches are just going to do whatever is in their best interest, and they don't really necessarily care about the player. So it clouds a lot of judgments about these players, and you really have to isolate the player from the scheme, which I think really takes a special talent to do. And it's something that a lot of evaluators are starting to evolve and gravitate towards over the years. But it's just an ego-driven league, and it's really hard to decipher some of these players and just what they do well and separate them from the scheme that they're currently running.
Absolutely. I think that is a great answer to a very complex question. I'm sure we could have a whole episode on that topic alone. Real quick, I know you got to get running here. Before you sign off, give us a grade on what you think the Bills got out of this draft, where you would grade their whole draft, and then tell fans where we can find you and what to look for.
Oh, it was an A without question for me. This was one of my top 5 favorite drafts. And I'm actually talking about this on my podcast tomorrow, and I actually bring up the Bills. And I thought it was really funny how some of these teams really, what's the best way to put it? They replicated the identity that they want their teams to be. And some of the examples I used were the Ravens. They really want to build speed. The Bills, they want to have a blue-collar, tough, hard-nosed team. And there's a lot of other prime examples too, like the Detroit Lions. They're another team that really wants to take safe players. And there was a lot of teams that really gave off their identity of who they want to be. And I thought the Bills really did that. They got players that are very mature, and they just show up and they do their job. So with Cody Ford, with Ed Oliver, with Devin Singletary, Dawson Knox, guys of that sort, you know they're very safe, but they're going to come in, they're going to give you every single thing that they got in them. And with Ed Oliver, you saw that on this film. There was no question that he didn't take plays off. There was never a question about his effort. Cody Ford, there was never a question about his effort. Devin Singletary, I mean, the stats speak for themselves, and he never tired out. They call him motor for a reason, just because he just has an endless motor. And then with Dawson Knox, even though his lack of production, he still came up to play every single week. So you're getting these guys that never complain. They just show up on Saturdays or game day, and they just did their jobs. That's what I like the most about the Bills draft class. And even the back end guys, Vosean Joseph, another guy that has upside, Darryl Johnson, Jaquan Johnson, even a Tommy Sweeney to an extent. So I don't want to say there's any misses in this class, because you're going to have misses in every single draft class. But I think when we're looking at this draft class 3 to 4 years from now, I think there's going to be a very high hit rate, because they have a lot of guys that have a high floor in this draft class.
That's awesome. So where can the people find you, and what do you got going on? And then I know you got to get it running here.
Yeah, so you can find me, of course, at cover1.net. I'm actually doing a running series right now called General Manager Speak, where I've just looked at every single press conference across the league, and I'm taking 3 or 4 quotes that they have said and what stuck out to me, and also my actual analysis on that, and the recap of each draft class as well. I know I have the San Francisco 49ers, the Jets, and also the Cardinals already up, and then the Raiders will be up on Wednesday. So make sure to be on the lookout for that. Climbingthepocket.com. You can find my work going on there as well. Also the Draft Board podcast. And like I said, the next episode will be up tomorrow. So just make sure to be on the lookout for that. Also, you can find me on Twitter at JReidNFL. That's at JREID NFL. And make sure you be on the lookout for that.
Awesome, man. We really appreciate you coming out and spending some time with us here.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Awesome work. Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks as always.
All right, man. It's just me and you. We're going to get into the nitty gritty here in a second.
As we get into it here, first, again, to thank Jordan, just did an awesome job. For anybody who didn't have a chance to see it, his draft guide was out of this world. Just unbelievable depth, 400 plus prospects, everyone who was out there. Like I said, the guy, he knew Darryl Johnson because he coached against him. He has an in-depth knowledge and understanding of these prospects that's just unbelievable. So I just really appreciate the time that he put into that and when he's able to get on here and talk like that, it's because he put in that work and he put in everything ahead of time. So just really impressed there. Same thing, Russell and Christian and the rest of the guys did an awesome job coming into there. For anyone who hasn't had a chance there, make sure you do check out cover1.net. A lot of really good things going on. Aaron and I spend far too much time in the premium channel Slack to be able to go and debate and argue and talk about what's going on. And one of those topics that did monopolize a lot of our time on Twitter today was getting into the undrafted free agents and where those come in. What were your thoughts after the draft? And what I always forget every year, you wrap up the draft and I forget exactly how frantic it gets, but Twitter and sites like that are hysterical and made for moments like this when everyone's scrambling to call the other guys in the next hour after the draft ends. What was your thoughts on some of the names that came aboard?
Yeah, to the franticness, I actually took the 7th round off. I decided to stop ignoring my family for the entire weekend. So I went out and did some stuff during the 7th round because I knew I wanted to get back for the frantic Twitter undrafted free agent, finding who's come in, seeing all that craziness. Obviously, the first off the board in the undrafted free agency, I'm just immediately, as soon as that last pick is turned in, Tyree Jackson to the Bills, undrafted free agent. UB fans go nuts. I've heard way too much about Tyree Jackson leading up to the draft. I'm going to rant just for a second here on this because it's nothing against Tyree Jackson. I think he's probably a great dude. He's a fine guy. I had heard a lot about him getting compared to Josh Allen. I heard a lot of people complaining about him not getting the respect because he was such a close candidate to Josh Allen in the process of the draft process, that it wasn't fair that Josh Allen was a 1st round pick and this guy's, they were talking maybe a 5th round pick at the time. And so I went back and looked at 4 games of his, and I immediately was like, oh yeah, no, this guy's not Josh Allen pick. He's got so much that he needs work on that it's not funny. I didn't think that he was a draftable guy for the Bills. I know some fans wanted that as a prospect. Anyways, long story short, Bills end up getting him. And this is something that I want to get your opinion on too, because we talked about it a lot. The Bills have a quarterback situation that's very interesting. They have Josh Allen, obviously, the guy that they've invested every single possible asset that they've acquired is to make his life better in this all important year 2 of his progression. Year 2, I think, is the biggest important year in the progression of a young quarterback. So they bring in Matt Barkley. They bring him back. Obviously, a solid NFL backup in case of emergency, and you have to play him. He's proven that he can do that for the Bills. He's not going to disrupt anything and push Josh Allen. He's only going to be a support system for him. They bring back Derek Anderson, and this is something we've talked a lot about. Derek Anderson is a guy that is not here to play football games. He's not here to take NFL snaps in 2019. He is solely here for the purpose of being supports to Josh Allen in the locker room. And a lot of people say, why can't he just be a coach? Well, the money is obviously one thing, and you can touch on that a little bit more in the details. And then really the thing that I think is the biggest one is there's things that coaches do that the things that players do that coaches can't do. Guys, as silly as it sounds on a professional level, they're not scared to ask other players questions that they're scared to ask coaches or talk to coaches about. They're not scared. There's meetings and stuff that the coaches are in where the players aren't. There's just a bond between players that doesn't exist with coaches. And I think ultimately people can't quantify that in their minds. And I think ultimately that is why Derek Anderson is here. Yes, we know he's not a very good football player, but by all indications, he's a guy that's a solid guy in the film room. He's a solid human being. He's a guy that Josh Allen can lean on. He's seen a lot of things. And I think at the $1 million price tag that he's gotten and the $700,000 cap hit, it's an invaluable piece to Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane to have Derek Anderson here. And I'd love your thoughts on it because I need a drink of water.
Yeah. And again, I the same way you said, I want to be respectful to the fact that Tyree Jackson was done a disservice. Whoever told him he should go into the draft this year hurt that young man and damaged his potential future opportunities when he was in the transfer portal, could have gone to a bigger school to be surrounded by, SEC talent or whatever it was going to be, or Oklahoma with a Lincoln Riley offense and that surrounding talent. He was done a disservice. This is not a degradation of him as a person or a player. I see the glimmers of hope that some people did. I see the very brief glimpses of Josh Allen in 1 or 2 throws, but nowhere near the prospect that he was, like you touched on. So then I'm okay with the idea that if everything pans out perfect, maybe he can earn a practice squad spot. But he wasn't drafted this past weekend. 3 days ago, all the fans on Twitter that get excited about how Tyree Jackson is some kind of roster lock. 3 days ago, 256 NFL players were drafted out of college. None of them were named Tyree Jackson. That's for a reason. So you come into a spot where, like you touched on, every single move we've made this entire offseason is centered around how can we make Josh Allen as talented and to do as well as he can. I touched on a couple weeks ago, it's very rare for an NFL quarterback room to have 3 guys who all have the same goal of how can we make Josh Allen look good. Most NFL quarterback rooms have a guy waiting for their turn, hoping that, oh, hey, I hope you don't trip walking out of the room and twist your ankle here so I get to start. You know, everybody has their own agenda, their own goal of getting to their time and their shot. It's very rare to have guys who have gone through some of those moments in their career, and that Matt Barkley and Derek Anderson have no delusions of grandeur that they're the guy. They are fully invested in making Josh Allen the best quarterback he can be. Now, if it works out that Tyree Jackson makes the practice squad and can sit in the back of the room as the 4th quarterback to absorb that while Derek Anderson and Matt Barkley are helping Josh Allen break down game film and set up opponent game plans and work through those challenges of a second-year quarterback, that's great. But anything that happens in 2019 that isn't solely focused on making Josh Allen the best quarterback he can be does not help the team. And there's no long-term prospect. It's not like we stumbled into I'm trying to find an example. It's not like we stumbled into Jarrett Stidham being undrafted, or that we stumbled into Daniel Jones being undrafted and like, hey, we might really have something here. This is crazy not to hold on to that talent. Tyree Jackson didn't get drafted. He didn't. He's not anything special. He's a very low likelihood of ever working out, and I'm okay with that if we hang on to him for the chance that, some people made some points of, I get that there's a benefit of Josh Allen's playing style and Tyree Jackson's playing style not having to change the offense down the line if somebody comes in after an injury. Sure, that sounds lovely. I don't know that he's ever going to reach that point where he can be a backup quarterback in the NFL, but I'm open to it, and I don't want anything in that room that isn't solely focused on Josh Allen being the best quarterback he can be. So
yeah,
you and I spent 2 hours, I think, debating that with people on Twitter today. And sadly, I'm sure it's not the last of it.
We'll be talking about it. Summer. We'll talk about it all summer. And to your point, though, and I agree in theory of the 2 quarterbacks that are the same, you can roll them out. Tyree Jackson isn't that. And the reason he's not that is I think he's a couple of years away from even being considered that, because you're still going to have to change the offense if he comes in. They ran a super vanilla offense at UB, and he still had trouble reading the field and reading his cues. And so even if he comes in, yeah, he's got the size and athleticism that Allen has, but you're going to really have to dumb down the offense for him. Where with the Matt Barkley, you don't have to dumb anything down. Yeah, maybe you have to change. You're not going to run a bunch of QB draws or anything crazy like that, and you have to really pick your plays to suit Matt Barkley, but you're not going to have to dumb anything down, and you don't have to make simple reads for him. He knows NFL defenses, and he can make those reads. So I don't think that the argument has a ton of legitimacy. Again, we don't want to spend too much time on this because this is really about the draft class, but it is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. A lot of comments I was getting is just let Derek Anderson cut him and let him be a coach. And I think that people need to understand there's a big difference between what coaches do and what the players do and talk about with themselves. So Tyree Jackson, though, I wish him luck. I think he's a perfect candidate to be on a practice squad.
Sure.
He's got the traits. He has done some great things at the college level. He has a lot to work on, from his stride to his mechanics to his ability to read defenses. That is what NFL practice squads are for, is guys that have a lot of traits but haven't been able to put the whole package together. So I think he's got that. You look at the rest of this list.
Yeah, there's an exciting name on there.
What do you like?
So there were a couple names that came out there. I do think it was logical we brought in a kicker, as kind of back end just in case insurance, in case
you just want a lot of balls getting kicked.
Hey, it's I like them when they get kicked. It's Stephen Hauschka's back, acted up at the end of last year. That makes people nervous, so I'm totally fine with that. Sure. I'm fine that we didn't bring in a punter because we have Corey versus Corey Puntapalooza 2019 going on. The player that got everybody's attention was wide receiver David Sills out of West Virginia, someone that virtually every draft analyst I've seen had a draftable grade on, some as high as late third, early fourth round. He was a guy who was, many people remember, he was the quarterback that everybody made a big deal out of, that at 13 years old, Lane Kiffin offered him a scholarship to USC. He ended up changing position to wide receiver later in high school, went into West Virginia, had a 1 year where he led all of college football in receiving touchdowns, had a ton of production, is a smooth athlete who high points the ball really well, is really good at jump balls in the end zone. Didn't test off the charts, but tested reasonably well. Maybe some continued physical development needed from an NFL body standpoint to get into that kind of long-term sustainable model. But a player that, as far as undrafted free agents go, I think he steps in with a very legitimate chance. I put it at, with him, Duke Williams, and Isaiah McKenzie, the three of them battling for that wide receiver 6 spot. I think that he's got as good a chance as anybody coming in to be able to snag one of those positions, and really, from a rare undrafted free agent standpoint, has a really good chance to make this roster. I put it at 40% Sills, 40% Duke Williams, and 20% Isaiah McKenzie, just because I think Duke Williams will translate on special teams a little bit better. I might give him the edge today, but from a receiver standpoint, I think Sills is already better.
Yeah, I do think Sills is a better wide receiver option. Obviously, you got to be able to stick on teams. I don't really know what to expect out of Duke Williams, and I think fans should really consider him as in the same category as a really undrafted free agent type player. Even though he's not, I think he fits in that clump of guys that are on the, trying to make this roster. I think fans maybe think of him a little bit higher because he got brought in that really slow time when the season's over and there's nothing to talk about. And then you maybe over talk about Duke Williams, and you see what he did in the CFL. CFL is not even the ACC. To be honest. So what Sills did is more impressive. And I was surprised he was available undrafted. Once we started getting around the 5th round, we were in the premium Slack channel and we were talking about, hey, who do we want to get? And I was like, is Sills still there? And as the draft went on, he's still there. And he chooses Buffalo. And I think that was a good choice for him. I really do think he can compete for that last wide receiver spot. So that's an interesting one. We didn't get a lot of offensive linemen, which usually you see 2 or 3 of those guys. We had so much offensive linemen in free agency, and then we addressed it again in this draft. That doesn't bother me. They bring in Blake Hance. Okay, maybe he becomes something. Maybe he's a practice squad guy. Who knows? Where I think is interesting that they brought in, and they were trying to bring in even more guys. We know that is the linebacker position. So I think it's really good to keep an eye on some of these guys. And Terrell Dodson is a guy that fans should really keep their eyes on. And Foggy is all right as well. I really like his last name. But these guys are guys to keep an eye on because they are going to be special teams contributors and they are looking to add to this linebacker room. So I really think that those guys have a shot at cracking the 53 or really sticking to the practice squad. What did you see out of them?
Yeah, the one other, actually, the wide receiver that didn't get any attention was one that Eric and I had touched on quite a bit earlier in the year. He brought up to my attention because we were joking about what a clone he was to Cole Beasley, and that's Iowa receiver Nick Easley. So I actually think Nick Easley has a real good shot at practice squad, and literally just handcuff him to Cole Beasley. Go follow him around. Hopefully we can hide him there for maybe 2 years, and then he can step in and be the next guy up to replace. That to be able to, just be able to step in and be the kind of player that can translate in that skill set. He has incredibly quick hands, incredibly quick feet in and out of breaks, really similar to Cole Beasley, that I think he's got a long-term potential with probably no real shot at the 2019 roster, but a guy I'd love to see on the practice squad. And then I think the one you touched on, I can't tell how much is because I like the name Foggy and how much is because he might be able to help on special teams, but I think he's got a shot as well.
Yeah, I do like Dotson a little better at the linebacker position. But I do think out of all the positions, linebacker is the guy that may be able to really stick on this roster, because after those top guys, there's really not anything great at the linebacker position. They're going to need some depth, and they're going to need some guys that are going to be able to come in and contribute on special teams. And I don't know that we have a lot of that right now. So if I'm looking at this list right now and thinking of guys that are really, I'm considering to make this roster in 2019 outside of practice squad, I like what you had to say about Easley, but I think he is totally primed to be a practice squad guy.
Yeah. I think almost no chance on the roster.
Yeah, I think fans will fall in love with him.
He's going to be a training camp and practice squad or a preseason game favorite.
Yeah, for sure. And I think fans will like that, but I definitely see him as a practice squad guy. I think Sills probably is not going to make your practice squad if he doesn't make the team. I think that just his college experience alone, that if he doesn't make the team, I just can't see him clearing waivers. So that might be a reason to slide him in over somebody else on the 53, just because you like the potential, you like what he's shown in camp, and you're just worried that he's not going to clear the waiver process, and you don't want to give up that asset. But I don't think that you can tuck him in on the practice squad. But I think the linebackers are definitely the guys for me to watch out to be on this team.
Absolutely. I know we got one question out of the YouTube, the Slack chair, the channel there. So appreciate everybody's comments. I think as we get through here, now that the dust is settled and that we have, the draft class is in place, the undrafted free agents are there. I know between Ryan Talbot and Sal Capaccio, they went through and identified that it looks like we have 2 roster spots left. And I know the name that keeps getting attached to the Bills is Ziggy Ansah, the defensive end from Detroit. He's done a lot of visits. He went out to Baltimore. He went out to New Orleans. Today or yesterday, he was out in Seattle. And we got questions in there. Where is he at? There was a report earlier today by Tom Pelissaro on NFL Network that said that multiple teams are waiting for a little bit further info on the shoulder, and also that several teams, this is not the Bills because we're not in line for a compensatory pick, but the cutoff for compensatory picks is May 7th. So I had speculated that maybe their agent is kind of posturing, saying, hey, you guys better hurry up and make an offer. Some of those teams might jump into the fray after May 7th. So I think that it was very telling on WGR yesterday. Brandon Beane was on there, was asked directly about it, and made a couple comments that, hey, nothing's finalized, but we're neither in on Ziggy Ansah nor out on that market. We're still seeing how things play out. And when his first response was nothing is finalized there, I kind of, how I like to connect dots and put on my tinfoil hat. That's the phrasing of someone who has gotten pretty close to finalizing a deal at some point. So now that may never translate, that may never turn into a deal, but that means that it's close enough in his mind that he felt he needed to clarify that, hey, nothing's finalized at this point, versus simply dismissing it as no new update there, nothing going on there. It would have been an easy thing to just completely dismiss out of hand. And the fact that his immediate instinctual response was there's nothing finalized there yet was interesting to me, and tells me that there's still a real opportunity. So whether he actually signs there or not, whether some other team comes in with more money, I'm confident that there's a standing offer from Brandon Beane right now with Ziggy Ansah's team, and it's very team friendly, and it's very structured with a low guarantee and incentives and bonus money he can get for games played, and that I'm sure his team is holding out for a little bit more guarantee or a little bit more money. And it'll be interesting if Beane ever budges on that, or whether Ansah and his team come back and decide, hey, this is our best offer we have. But I do think that there still is a real opportunity that they sign him.
Yeah, no, I think there's plenty of opportunity that they sign him. There's clearly interest. Nobody's hidden that fact. I think that the time that it's taking is real. Reports were that his shoulder isn't ready, that he might not be ready for full strength programs even until August. So I think there's no rush to get a deal done. They want to get this other physical in. So now that's 2 physicals that teams are waiting on to really check their shoulders. So that's a real concern there. And when you're talking about a guy that's at a position that's physical, you need to use your hands, shoulders, things like that you're going to make any type of substantial investment in him. You want to make sure that that's legitimately fine and he can get into the strength program with your team in August. So I don't think Brandon Beane's in any rush. Would it be great to bring him in? Sure. I think that's totally fine to bring him in. And if not, I think the Bills are totally confident where they are at either way. I think that they feel good. And so Brandon, what I took out of that is Brandon Beane saying, you know what, if the health checks out, fantastic. We'd love to have you. If it doesn't, or you're start negotiating with Seattle, I'm not going to get into a bidding war for this guy, but if we can get you, great. If not, whatever, we're fine. I do think two things fans are kind of sleeping on this conversation, and I talked about it a little bit on Twitter today, is one, I think people are maybe overestimating what Ziggy Ansah brings to this team. I don't think he's the guy that puts this team over the top and the expectations change, or he moves the needle in any real substantial way for me. I think he's a really nice addition to the line who would compete for a starting job and be a nice rotational pass rusher guy that can maybe get you close to a double-digit sack guy. Fantastic. I love that. But the other thing that people are maybe underestimating is Trent Murphy. I think he had a down year last year. A lot of that was because of the injury kind of lingered. He had some issues that are often associated to ACL injuries that can kind of slow down his progress in the early part of the year. I thought he actually did really well as the year went on. It didn't always show up on the sacks or stat sheet, but you always saw him in the backfield as the year went on. I think I'm feeling like Trent Murphy has a really good chance to have a really breakout year in this defense. And I think the Bills feel that way too. They didn't give him that money for nothing. I think they really like the player he is. And sometimes I know there's been a lot of cases of these guys coming back from ACL injuries and coming back really strong and having great seasons, but the majority of guys really take a full year after that type of injury to get back to where they were, whether it's just the nutrition, their body, other injuries coming up because you're putting more pressure on other parts of your body. Things change after an injury like that. So he's a full year removed. I am expecting him to get a lot closer to living up to the contract they gave him. Am I crazy?
No, not at all. Well, one, I always like to remind people think that he missed some weird amount of games and was never there. Trent Murphy played 13 games last year, 13 out of 16. Now, that's not 16. I would have preferred all 16 games, and I know he was on the injury designation multiple times, but he played and did that coming off of a ACL injury. So I still think there's a lot of opportunity. I think it's very fair to say, did we get the full value of what we paid Trent Murphy last year? Probably not. That's a perfectly fine conclusion to take. The leap people take is, that means we need to cut him. The Buffalo Bills are no longer.
He's a bust.
Yes. Well, we've been so trained of year after year of short-term Band-Aid, crappy contract after crappy contract, that every Bills fan is trained to say, let's look at the roster. Who is the most palatable cut that we can make? What are the releases we have to make in order to get under the salary cap? We don't have to do any of that anymore. Brandon Beane fixed the salary cap. We are in much better position. We don't need to release people just to get back underneath. So I'm probably a little bit higher on Ziggy Ansah than you are, because he did earn a franchise tag for a reason. 14 and a half sacks, 12 sacks, 48 career sacks. We don't have anybody outside of Jerry Hughes. None of the rest of our guys are in that realm. So if healthy, I think he's a material upgrade over Shaq Lawson and Trent Murphy, but he's probably not on Jerry Hughes level. So that rotational guy, maybe he plays a few more snaps than what Murphy or Shaq Lawson do, but he'd be in that rotation. And I know some people in the chat were talking about, if we traded for a guy or if we signed on, it's a great, we can release Trent Murphy. Remember, we need 4 defensive ends. 4 defensive ends play every game. They all rotate. All of them play 30% or more of the snaps. Almost none of them play over 60% of the snaps. It is a rotation. We need 4 guys who can contribute. I want Ziggy Ansah as the 4th guy to add in with Murphy, Hughes, and Shaq Lawson to be able to rotate in there to do that. So, yeah, I don't see any chance that Murphy is cut this year. If he has a rough year health-wise again or doesn't meet expectations, then we can get into that discussion going into 2020.
Well, I think there's a out in his contract.
There is
2020, so that is why they build those in to get out. If he doesn't live up to the contract by then, for sure he's a gunner. And I agree with you. If they bring in Ansah, it's Eddie Yarbrough who's out, not
correct.
Eli
Harold. Yeah, that means that Eli Harold's not making it. That means that Darryl Johnson's on the practice squad.
Yes, and I'm all for a scenario where that plays out. And I agree with you that the potential of Ziggy Ansah, if healthy, is much greater than starting Trent Murphy, and I'd love to see him with Jerry Hughes. I'm just saying, I'm seeing a lot on Twitter of people if we get Ziggy Ansah, like, oh, we're ready to go out. He's not the kind of guy that's gonna just. He's not Khalil Mack. He's not the Bears.
That's a scenario. You make a great analogy with the Bears all the time, and that was their finishing move. And I know that I think Ron might be in the chat. I haven't seen him here. He hasn't reminded me yet today that the Bills should go out and trade for Jadeveon Clowney, but usually he reminds me every day.
I've seen some of it, but not from Ron.
Yeah. So now that is a Khalil Mack level finishing move to say, hey, that's our big final piece. Ziggy Ansah is not that. Ziggy Ansah is a nice signing. Ziggy Ansah is a Ty and Secchi level signing. Like a nice, should be a good starter. That's great. He's not a finishing move for anything. Right. But I'd still take him. He's better than Eddie Yarbrough and Eli Harold. I'll take him.
I want a lot of Ty and Secchis. I'm not saying that I don't want. I want Ziggy Ansah. That is not what I'm saying. I just want people to know that when we get Ziggy Ansah, don't start ordering your playoff ticket quite yet. But anything else that we want to touch on here before we wrap this up for the evening? What else? What any thoughts you got?
One fun. You asked the same question to Jordan, so I'm going to put it to you, and then I'll give you my answer. What is your grade for the Bills? Overall draft, undrafted free agents, all 8 picks, the trades they made. What was your overall grade? I've seen a lot of very favorable ones. I put out that I retweeted one of the memes out there of the shocked face of the Bills fans are not used to all this positive feedback and support and people grading them, and several people picking them as the best draft overall. Where did things shake out for you?
So I'm gonna get called a homer no matter what I do anyway on Twitter. I'm gonna go with an A+ or A- is where I'm at with them. And the only reason I give them the minus is really one thing is I didn't want the amount of picks that they walked away with. I really wanted them to move up again, maybe back up, into the 4th where they didn't have a pick. And I was a little upset still, even though we got some in undrafted free agency. I'm with a lot of Twitter in that there were some wide receivers that I liked, and I know that they said that wasn't on their board at the time, but there were some guys that I felt that maybe that was more of a position of need than we addressed. And, I know Darryl Johnson may be able to be a good practice squad guy down the road, or Tommy Sweeney, but just on the surface, just walking away with those, 2 7th round picks, I would have liked to have packaged something a little sooner. It walked away with maybe a little less. So that's where I'm at with an A-, but having kept all the picks, I like all the picks where they did draft. So I'm still in the A's.
Sure. And I actually had put one of those messages out that for a lot of fans, if we had drafted David Sills and undrafted free agent signed Darryl Johnson, there are people who would have been so much happier, and it doesn't really matter.
No,
the 7th round pick versus an undrafted free agent has no actual bearing on likelihood of making the roster, long-term contract ramifications, contract control. All those things are incredibly similar for an undrafted free agent and a 7th round pick. But I know a lot of people would have felt better if David Sills was technically in the draft class and Darryl Johnson was the signing that took place afterwards. So just the semantics of that, I think, could have made people a little bit happier. Like you said, I tried to be reasonable, and instead of an A+++ with 4 pluses, I dialed it back to just an A+++ with 3 pluses. The only reason that I wasn't over the moon is I really had my mindset that we were about to take Chase Winovich with that 74th pick, or that we were going to trade up from 74 to 64 and snag DK Metcalf. I thought those were 2 top 40 level players that were still there that we could have gotten. Now I've come around from, I was fairly upset for a minute there. I've come around as I've talked to people like Jordan and Eric and others who really break down the film and have helped me embrace how good Devin Singletary could be down the line. But I did have my mind on a couple of people, and I know as you and I did a dozen mock drafts, I kept saying how important that 74th pick was and how I felt we were going to get a really talented guy to fall to us. And the fact that you saw some of those names like Hakeem Butler and Kelvin Harmon and, Chase Winovich and Jalen Ferguson all sitting there. And Terry McLaurin, who went right afterwards. And some of those names sitting there that I felt like Devin Singletary was a luxury pick and that we could have hit one more home run. Now, I also made the comment that there is no scenario where your first 2 picks without giving up anything substantial were Ed Oliver and Cody Ford, where that's not a grand slam of a draft. It just is. We got exceptional value at 2 critical need positions for really talented 2 top 15, top 20 players, probably a top 3 player and then a top 15, 20 player at 9 and 38. That's a win in any book. But I thought we could have maybe hit a 3rd home run with that pick. And I think Devin Singletary is a nice pick that we're probably going to be happy about 2 and 3 years from now. But that was the only thing that stopped it from being an absolute grand slam. I love the fact that people are saying what a good draft we had. It is reassuring that this staff can pick out good players, and that I think Vosean Joseph is going to be a really nice one. I think Dawson Knox and Singletary are going to be deferred enjoyment that we're going to really enjoy a couple years down the line. But I'm really happy about it, and I genuinely would give it an A. I really think that we earned an A with the kind of talent that was there and the impact positions we got.
Yeah, the A- also comes with Terry McLaurin going 2 picks. After just I was with you, man. In the moment,
I was
Knox didn't.
I was mad.
Yeah, and not that I don't like the Singletary Knox pick, and I do, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that. It's going to be deferred enjoyment.
Yeah,
and I do think fans need to wait for that. I think a lot of excitement that Knox is going to come in and totally change this offense right away. I think those things are going to happen over time. But there was so many guys in that range that would have given me immediate enjoyment, and I think that my fan in me took over and wanted 2019 enjoyment. And so I was shook in the 3rd round, and it took me a minute. I was just sitting there online, like angry and mad, and didn't know what was going on. Now that I've been able to take a step back and talk about it with people that are smarter than me, I'm totally fine with it, and that's where I'm at with an A. But in the moment, man, I was shook.
Oh, no, I honestly, and I got mad at myself because I let it make me mad about the first 2 awesome picks, and that's not fair. That's silly to do. That it doesn't undo how amazing those first 2 picks are. And then now stepping back is a perfectly reasonable pick, and lots of people had him. It graded well, and in that spot, I just I'm not used to the Bills being able to take luxury picks of just the best guy on the board, so I'm still trying to get my mind around that.
Yeah, and Calvin brings up an interesting point here. It was a high price, 2 4th rounders for Knox. And at the time I thought that too, but to my point of giving them an A-, they weren't leaving with 10 picks. We knew that going into it. They weren't doing it. They got rid of one of the picks for Cody Ford. You knew they were moving more picks. If that's your guy and you're worried that somebody else is going to snag him before you're coming around next, and he's on your board at that level, which is what they told us. And I know some of that is GM speak, that they're always going to say that the guys are the top guys on their board. I get that, but we got to take their word for it here. And if that is all the case, I have no problem with it. And maybe he doesn't work out, but if he doesn't work out, I'm not going to look back in 3 years and say, darn, I really wish we would have had those 2 4th round picks back.
And I know everybody goes crazy about the trade value chart and all that kind of stuff, but I will say it was reinforced again this weekend. Almost every single draft trade was plus or minus 10% from that NFL draft chart. Teams use some similar variety of that. Now, it may not be the exact calculation. Some people really differ on future picks versus current year picks. Some people really put a high premium on the top 5, top 10 picks. But in general, this value chart that's out there and the one that's generally accepted around the league is relatively used by all teams. Just as a reference, those 2 4th round picks, the 112th pick was worth 70 points. The 129th pick, or the 131st pick, was worth 41. 70 and 41 is 111. The pick that the Bills got was worth 116 points. By the NFL trade chart, we won that trade. So I know people get in their minds, oh, but it was 2 4th round picks. That's got to be worth more than a third. It's not. By every other trade metric that's out there, we won that trade. Not only did we not do a bad trade, we got the better end of the value on that. So just relative, just to give people the frame of reference, it's, whether you like it or not, or think we could have got it. I also want to say that what we traded Dawson Knox for Washington drafted Bryce Love and a guard out of a small school I've never heard of.
Yeah, totally fine with that.
So it's not something that there was some terrible, we didn't get ripped off. At minimum, it was even. And again, by the metrics of it, we won the trade.
Yeah, no, I'm totally fine with the trade. And again, we weren't walking away with the picks. And those metric the trade value charts are all relative until you actually get into the trade, and it's never exact. There's always going to be somebody's getting skewed one way or another with the way the values shake out. The math just doesn't always add up. For it to always be even. So in this case, we won out. That's fine. Where can the people find you and your beautiful lapel and your nice hair and interact with you on a regular basis?
Come and find me on Twitter. I am arguing with people whether I like it or not, or whether I tell myself to or not. I try not to, but I end up finding myself doing it over and over again. Come find me on Twitter at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. Shout out to my lovely wife. My birthday was over the weekend. She got me this lapel pin for the Bills that I can now, bring the Bills with me when I go to work, besides the 37 polos that I wear there every other day. But no, just really enjoy that. Had a good time this weekend, had a good time going live for the show. I got turned into a GIF, so I feel internet famous for a moment. It was a lot of fun and had a great time interacting with everybody. We are now kind of more in the long winter of the NFL. The first part with free agency coming and the draft is actually easier. Our next 2 months is rough until training camp comes. So this is going to be a rough patch, but we got a lot of good things to go over from a position preview standpoint and maybe a couple other moves out there. So continue to stay connected with us on Twitter and in the Cover One premium Slack, and we'll continue to bring you guys good info.
And you started a Cover One Facebook group. You want to tell the people about that real quick?
Yeah, come on out. It was an area, I know Facebook's not for everybody. There's plenty of people that don't do that, but me and my grandma have an awesome time on Facebook. So if you can come out there and check it out, we've got a group going there, a lot of good discussion. Eric has posted a ton of videos. So if you're looking for maybe a little bit more in-depth than what can be posted on Twitter and to be able to have a running dialogue, the engagement on there's been really good so far. So come on out. It's Cover One Buffalo. We have a page and a group that are out there. We'll be sure to post the links where they're at, but we've had a lot of really good engagement already. So just only having it up for about 2 or 3 days now. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun and going to bring some additional insight as we go into breaking down these players.
Absolutely. And make sure that you're following everybody at Cover One. Obviously, a special shout out to Jordan Reid for coming on tonight. Keep an eye out for all his work. Those guys, we lead up to the draft and a lot of work goes into that, but the work actually just really gets going again for them. There's really no breaks. They're breaking down all the prospects and all the different teams. And obviously you're going to get the Bills coverage from us that you can always expect out of Cover One. So make sure that you stay tuned to all that. Follow us on all your social media accounts. While you're over here on YouTube, make sure that you go over and subscribe, but also hit the little notification bell over there on YouTube. That notifies you whenever we go live or whenever Eric uploads a new video, any type of breakdown or anything like that. So make sure that you head over there and do that and subscribe. And if you're listening to us on iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts, make sure that you're subscribed to us and that you leave a nice little review about how much you enjoyed listening to us here this evening. That really helps us out a lot. We can't do this without the fans, and we really appreciate it. And for the fans, we give you the opportunity to become a premium member and subscribe to our premium channel. And that gets you access to our Slack channel, access to our premium content, which is only really going to ramp up here as the season goes on. And right now for $10, you can get premium access for the entire season. So that gives you all the access to our Slack channel, our film room in the Slack channel, and all of our premium content. As we get going into training camp, that premium content really starts to ramp up. So make sure you act now. Head over to cover1.net, check out the premium stuff, and subscribe to that because it's really worth it. You can find me at Aaron Quinn 716, interacting wherever. And Greg shouted out his wife, and I really want to give a shout out to my wife too, because the draft season has been really hard on her and taking care of the kids at night while I do this show. Well, I do the show and I argue with everybody on the internet. So she's been a trooper, and I really appreciate that from her. But definitely stay with us, guys, and make sure that you stay tuned and bear with us here through this long stretch that Greg talked about, because it's going to be fun once we get into the training camp side of things. So thanks for coming out tonight, guys. We really appreciate it, and we'll catch you next week.